In our studies in the book written by one of Jesus' followers, the Gospel or Good News authored by Mark, we come today to two short stories in chapter 7 verses 24 to 37. You might find it helpful to have a Bible open in front of you. However, in these verses we read, Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply you may go, the demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. And he took him aside, away from the crowd. Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him, Ephphatha, which means, be opened. At this the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosed, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He's done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. Now, I would like to suggest that Mark includes these two stories here because they contain some delightful and vital lessons for us, his readers. He sought to show us in his book that Jesus is God incarnate, God revealed in a human being. However, the first point Mark surely wants us to grasp is that the Jesus of whom he writes was no local God, because Jesus' power and authority extended beyond the Jewish people among whom he was born. So the two events described here took place outside the Jewish world. The first took place in Tyre, a location north of Jewish occupied territory. The second took place in Decapolis, an area east of the Jordan River, where again non-Jews lived. Both places were outside the boundaries of anything that could be called Israel. Jesus had already demonstrated his authority in the Decapolis when he healed the demon-possessed man, as we read in chapter 5 verses 1 to 20. There Jesus had demonstrated his authority over the spiritual powers opposed to God. Now the same power that was at work in Galilee and Decapolis is seen in Tyre. And just as Jesus had shown his authority over the effects of the fall in Galilee in healing those subject to all the sicknesses that had followed humankind's abandonment of God, so the same authority is witnessed in the Decapolis. So, says Mark, Jesus is king. Those of us following this story may need the reassuring confidence that this reminder of Jesus' rule brings. Especially in the times of struggle, darkness and discouragement, he can deliver us from every form of bondage to sin and the powers of darkness that inhabit our world and us. But Mark wants to make a further point. The good news in Jesus is for all sorts and types of men and women. The particular consequence of the former truth is drawn out here. Jesus is ready to meet the needs of all those who humbly seek him and trust him. This is vividly illustrated in the first story. In religious, linguistic and racial origins, as well as in her gender, this woman was an outcast. She didn't think right, speak right, or come from the right place. However, Jesus was ready to respond to her need. But we also note that in each of these two cases, Jesus took these two people from where they were and sought to encourage their trust in him. The woman may have sought him, as many did, as a wonder worker. However, Jesus' riddle was intended to evoke personal trust and faith in him. His words do look harsh, but we cannot hear the tone of voice in a written page. Moreover, Jesus says first, and pet dogs, to offer a doorway for the woman to express her belief that true religion was from the Jews, and that she might have a part in the blessings that he himself brought. Her immediate response and her subsequent action indicate that, however indistinctly, she had placed her confidence in Jesus. The deaf and dumb man, too, is invited by sign language to learn the same lesson. In this way, the handicapped, too, marginalized in Jewish Old Testament religion and many cultures, were shown to have a full place alongside of Jesus and in his plans. I think Mark and Jesus are trying to encourage us here. When we despair and doubt, as we sometimes do, the knowledge that Jesus was ready to meet the needs of the marginalized and the outcasts is a real comfort to those of us who follow him, and to those of us who are considering becoming his disciples. A further lesson is, however, equally important. Contained within this section is the reminder that we have an obligation to the whole world, because Jesus' compassion extended and extends to all sorts and conditions of people. And finally, there's something rather delightful about Jesus' banter with the woman and his tenderness towards the deaf-mute. Not only did he have time for them, but he was so human and caring with them. Jesus may be God, but he is very different from other gods. He was, and so Mark implies, is still compassionate. A compassion that he showed to those who were considered or considered themselves worthless. The Christian faith is not for those who consider themselves to be someone. Quite the contrary. Jesus dealt and deals with gentleness with the nobodies in society. Some of us are inclined to castigate ourselves, sometimes feeling the burden of our worthlessness and believing ourselves not to be good enough for God. But this is not the Jesus of the Bible, or the Jesus of those who have followed him ever since. There's much to comfort and encourage us here. Jesus is King. He lays claims over all and everybody. Christianity is an exclusive faith. Yet this Jesus is ready to meet us in whatever condition we come to him. Jesus is willing to stoop and show compassion to us and all those who seek him. Alleluia.